everybody. Welcome to Veganic Gardeners Question Time. Just as I was watching that video, which really gives you some stats, doesn't it? Which are really shocking, but there's a great kind of movement forward with plant-based farming. I was about to sneeze. So just as we started, excuse me for a second. Now more than ever, it is vital that we engage with how our food is grown. And by growing your food veganically, you are part of the growing revolution, which can not only transform your garden plot, but also change the way the world grows its food. So hi everyone, I am Ellen Mary. In tonight's show, we have an amazing panel. Just to introduce myself first before we go into an announcement and meet our panel, I'm a gardener. That's the core of everything that I do. I am an author and a broadcaster. I garden veganically. I have a veganic allotment plot, which really gets all of the allotment neighbours talking when they come over and kind of getting them really interested in what we're growing and how on there. And mostly I talk about how we can connect people better to nature, because we are nature after all. So before we meet the panel, I'm really looking forward to hosting this evening because we've got some great questions. We have an announcement to make. And calling all gardeners to this announcement, do you have a pot plant or an allotment or forest garden, school, or a business garden perhaps? And do you grow your plants veganically? If you do, then it is time to join our veganic map. How exciting! So let's show the world that we can grow our food without animal manure. We don't need fish blood or bone meal to do that. Animal agriculture, synthetic fertilizers, and pesticides are the leading cause of ocean dead zones, river pollution, and loss of wildlife. How we grow our food is key to solving the environmental crisis. So by joining the map, you can connect with like-minded gardeners in your area and all around the world. The benefits of joining the map: seed swapping, I love seed swapping, advice and skills exchange, meetups, produce swapping, resources, and even allotment or land sharing. And what's better than that is it's free. So you can join the Veganic map. Go to www.veganorganic.net /join/map. So you'll find it on the veganorganic.net website. I'm going to say it again: veganorganic.net /join/map, and join the revolution. This part is free. Get on the garden map and let's just build the network of veganic growers. So before we introduce the panel, for your information, all of our shows are recorded. They can be watched on YouTube. Please remember to like the videos and subscribe to the channel, because that helps us to get out there more and be seen by more people. And also sign up for our free newsletter that will keep you updated on the growing revolution. And do join and support the network, the work of the Vegan Organic Network, and get a copy of our wonderful magazine called Growing Green International. It is full of stories, loads of advice, plenty of information, and you can find that also on the veganorganic.net website. I definitely recommend you do go along and have a little look at all of the resource there, and the YouTube channel as well. And don't forget to like and share posts and videos on social media, that kind of thing, because all of that really helps us to get word out there. So I think it's time then. It's time to introduce the panel. I'm Ellen Mary, I already introduced myself. So let's introduce our panel this evening. Let's start off with Dan. Dan is a veganic horticultural tutor, forest gardener, forager, and all-round plant enthusiast. And having worked for some years in sustainable food policy research, he has turned to the land, creating and teaching about resilient food systems. He's passionate about indigenous earth wisdom, restoring wild spaces, and creating edible landscapes that nourish all beings. So, really looking forward to chatting with you, Tham. Welcome to the Gardener's Question Time.
Thank you.
How are you doing this evening?
Very well. We've just come back. We're actually based in the northeast, but I've come back to our parents' house in London we've got a few workshops that we're going. We're in the London Permaculture Festival last week. Some workshops coming up with forest gardening here in London. Yeah, so very busy. It's a very busy time of year. Of course, you'll know very well.
It is a busy time of year. It can be
Yeah.
overwhelming sometimes at this time of year,
Oh
but
God,
it's
it
just
is.
about just enjoying the process. That's how I try to think of it, so I don't get too overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So you currently tutor, I think, don't you, with a few projects? So what projects are you working on at the moment?
So I was, my profile said I was tutoring on courses for the OrganicLea, which is a workers' cooperative and market garden at the edge of London. This was last year, but we've moved to Northeast now. So I do some more workshops, ad hoc workshops for them here and there. But my sort of main organisation, which I'm affiliated to, is the Orchard Project, which I again do freelance work for. Orchard Project, fantastic organisation, looking at lots more fruit trees around urban areas. But that side, the main sort of work we do is we've set up our own little enterprise called Nourish the Wild, where we're very much involved, me and my partner are involved in the educational space around about land, relating to land connection, really connecting with the land with foraging, growing food, but with almost the spiritual dimension. That's what we're exploring more and more and sharing in this new phase. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. How can people find you online? Is there somewhere where people can look you up?
Yeah, nourishthewild.co.uk, but we're fairly active on Instagram, Nourish the Wild again. Yeah, so look out for our events. Well, we've got two homes really, London. Well, my parents' home, where I brought up, and where we're actually based in Northumberland. So
that's a big difference.
Yeah.
There's a big difference from
Very,
London
but
to
you get to
Northumberland.
see the full progress of the seasons, all the different nuances that you get in a small country, which is quite fantastic, really.
How have you seen the difference in gardening where you are now compared to where you were in London? Is there anything that's particularly stood out for you since you've moved?
Yeah, it's less water pressure, really. It's been raining nonstop. I mean, it's so. I don't want to say it because people are getting a massive influx of people up north, which is quite nice and quiet at the moment. But lots more rain up there, and it's definitely a little bit of a chill there. We're actually on a hilly area as well, on top of a hill, so you got those additional pressures. But that's not to say all of Northumberland is like that. But yeah, you feel the difference with growing vegetables. Slightly different. Here is very much about water conservation. It should be, water conservation is a big thing regardless, but it's a slightly different challenge.
Yeah.
Certain things need a bit more time. Growing seasons a bit shorter as well to some extent. But yeah, but it's our first year, so we're very much learning.
Right. Well, looking forward to seeing how that progresses. Like every year is an experiment in gardening. That's how I see it. Every year is different no matter where you are. Thank you so much. Really looking forward to chatting with you through some of the great questions we've got this evening. So next up, another veganic gardener who you definitely will have seen here on Veganic Gardeners Question Time. It's Piers. Hi, Piers. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, talking of rain, I'm based in East Sussex near Brighton, and one of the main problems we've had this year is a drought. Until the last couple of weeks or so, we had in June, early July, I think we had something like 6 weeks without a drop of rain, and I've really noticed that in the quality of the crops this year. Some have been really slow to get going, and that's even with occasional watering. It's just been so hot and dry, particularly in June. That's been a problem.
It's interesting how different it is in different areas of the UK for such a small country as well. It's really varied. So I'm in Norfolk, and we had the hot spell in June. We didn't have any rain. It was just so hot. And now it hasn't stopped raining for weeks on end. And I'm confused. No wonder the plants are confused. So, Piers, you're a conservationist, you're an author, you're a keen grower of organic fruit and vegetables, founder of Wild Eye, the International School of Wildlife Filmmaking, writer of several books, and co-author of The Vegan Cook and Gardener. Tell us a little bit more about your books.
Well, yes, I've written a number of books, and they're on a wide variety of subjects, but most of them are to do with growing veganic things. And actually, one of my very first books was called How to Store Your Garden Produce, and that's just come up to its 20th anniversary since it was first published. And the publishers asked to produce a new edition which will have full color photographs throughout and an updated text. So that's the project I'm working on at the moment. All the photos are done now, and yeah, it's the text I'll be tackling next. So hopefully that'll be coming out end of this year, early next year, something like that.
Well, that's fabulous. Congratulations. And having another, book out there encouraging people to grow veganically, knowing how to store and grow food. That's really excellent news. How is your garden growing right now with all of the changes of weather over the last few months?
Well, I don't know if you remember the Fast Show. You're probably too young, but this week I've been mostly eating courgettes and French beans. And in fact, I've been eating courgettes and French beans for about 2 weeks now, every day. And they have been the most successful things so far. I mean, they're real basics, aren't they? They will grow as long as they get a bit of sun and a bit of water. But yeah, and there's obviously things like lettuces and radishes and things like that, especially earlier in the season, they're pretty easy to get going. But other things like pumpkins and things like that, which again are usually pretty easy, I've noticed they've been very slow to set fruit. And again, I think that's down to the lack of water. But we've got all this rain now, so hopefully some will catch up.
Yeah, hopefully so. I'm actually with you. I've eaten nothing but potatoes, climbing beans, courgettes, and I've grown one which is a round courgette this year, and they've been prolific, and turnips as well. So I've been harvesting them when they're quite small, and they're kind of creamy and delicious, but loads of turnips. But other than that, things are very, very slow this year. So yeah, it's interesting how each year is so different. Okay, I think we're time for some questions, don't you? If any of you who are watching would like to post a question into the comment box, go ahead and we will try to answer them during the show, although we do have quite a few questions to get through over the next half an hour or so. But if you do pop them in the comments section, you might find that somebody else who's listening has the answer for you as well. So do get involved. Let's get going with our first question is about fruit. So first question this evening, we have 3 blueberry bushes purchased at the same time some time ago now. They are all in pots to keep the soil ericaceous. This year, one of them has not fruited at all. The other 2 seem fine. Any tips on how to get the rogue bush to fruit again? Also, I can't seem to find a vegan ericaceous compost anymore. Any tips on where to get some? And that's Evie from Eastbourne, who would like to take that question.
I can kick off if you like. So first of all, the last bit about the where to buy the compost from. There is a company called Silver Grow who do produce an organic, peat-free ericaceous compost that's suitable for vegans. So do check them out, and they seem to have some quite good products. Silver Grow, by the way, is spelled SYLVA, but if you just Google that, you'll find them, no problem. As for the plants, they're in pots, and they were all bought at the same time, and only one of them is not fruiting. So my main thought is that perhaps it's become root bound, and therefore the roots can't get enough water, and in particular blueberry bushes need good watering, especially early in the season. So what I would do is simply remove that plant from the pot, check out its roots, and then repot it in a bigger pot with fresh compost and just tease out the roots a bit, and hopefully that'll encourage it to fruit better next year.
Perfect, thank you. Dan, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, pruning always renews vigor. So pruning in winter, so that's always an option. But make sure you look out for the fruit buds, which are generally a bit more swollen than the vegetative buds. So don't remove too much of that. And hopefully that might also, if the root issue isn't the issue, then that might do the trick. And also, if you are seeing flowers but they're not fruiting, maybe a liquid comfrey feed or something to encourage that along as well. But odd that this particular one is behaving differently. So yeah, may well be the root issue.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I do have a confession to make. I have some blueberry bushes, and one was a new one, and it was in a pot, and I placed it over near the blueberries, just thinking, right, I will plant it out. And then the fruit cage got kind of overgrown, and I forgot to plant it. And in the heat, it pretty much didn't make it. So I feel very sad about that. But I completely forgot to water it, so no blueberries from that one this year. So next question then. Question 2 is from Simon Rycroft. Simon says, we have on our allotment some communal compost bins. I cannot be sure material put into them has been grown organically. Is it safe to put on my allotment after it has fully rotted down? Are there any commercially available organic soil improvers on the market? P.S. My allotment is a small one, so I don't produce enough material to make a compost viable. Who would like to take this question first?
I can go. Yes. So if generally, I mean, it's always a trade-off with this sort of thing, because buying in organic composts, which there are, which I'll add at the end, has its own additional environmental issues. You know, huge transport costs, comes in a massive plastic bag, and where is that fertility coming from? It's sort of different parts of the world, possibly in other parts. So we're not really closing the loop. So as you have a local resource, I would probably err on the side of using it. Whether it has, there is always the risk that it might bring in a small amount of contaminants, but I assume it's not sort of roadside waste, and it sounds, if it's being communal compost bin in an allotment, maybe it's more sort of people's food waste, and contamination residues might be lower, and some of it will be leached away anyway. So I would say make use of it. And of course, it doesn't sound like you're operating a sort of certified organic site, veganic site anyway. That aside, generally, I mean, it's always good to try to increase your composting volume by drawing on, maybe collecting food waste from neighbors or other materials like newspapers, cardboard and things to bulk up, add more browns in, so you can increase that volume as well. In terms of organic soil improvers and compost, there are quite a few out there. One very good company is Fertile Fibers. That's fibers. And I'm sure there's many, many more, but that's the one we've used with some of the sites I've worked for. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much. Piers, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, another good supplier of organic soil improvers is Plant Grow, and they can supply it in sacks or in bulk bags. So just take a look at plantgrow.co.uk. Another couple of possible additives are seaweed meal, which again you can buy by the sack, or organic volcanic rock dust, which adds minerals to your soil, so improves it that way. And I've got a friend of mine who's got a good sized vegetable garden, and she swears that adding this volcanic rock dust has made a huge improvement to her crops. As for the aspect of whether it's safe or not to use compost from the communal compost area, that's a really tricky one to answer, and it depends what you mean by safe and what your criteria for safety is. So one way obviously is to speak to all your allotment neighbours who use this communal area, to ask them whether they use chemicals themselves, whether it be herbicides, pesticides, fertilisers, whatever. Bear in mind that some of these chemicals do take years, maybe even 4 or 5 years to fully break down. And then you'll just have to make some sort of judgment call about whether you feel that is safe enough for you to use.
Yeah, quite. It's difficult, isn't it? Because you don't know what someone else is using on their plot. I am someone took over a plot close to me where I am on my allotment site, and I noticed one day that kind of the end of their plot where there were lots of kind of overgrowth, that it had just suddenly all gone yellow, and I thought, oh, they've definitely used something on that. But what they had then done is walked in it, and then with their footprints walked all the way along the path down past my allotment, and you could see obviously the weed killer on the bottom of their shoes actually made the imprint in the grass, and the grass had died where they walked. So then that's really close to my plot, and my plot doesn't have anything on it. So when you are in a shared space, it's very difficult, isn't it, to know who's doing what. But I think, I like have a chat, see what other people are using. And again, like Dan said, sometimes, like you said, it's a trade-off, it's there. If you feel, that that's safe enough, then use it for sure. That is a tricky one, but yeah, I would use it. I would use it if I've had a little chat around the allotment and been sure everybody is good with what they're growing. Okay, let's go on to the next question, because this one is a good one, and I'm sure lots of you have probably had this question in mind a few times. I certainly did a few years ago. This is from Ali in Brighton, and Ali says, what to do about vine weevils? Nematodes have worked in the past, but with the heat and desiccation, I think the soil's too dry for the nematodes to survive. My plants have been chewed to bits by the adults, and I expect a lot of losses between now and next spring from hungry, chompy larvae. Any ideas? Who would like to take that one first? Oh, vine weevils. Oh.
Yeah. Well, just a couple of ideas. With the adults, the best time to try and collect the adults is at night, and you can usually tell they're there because around the edges of the leaves you'll see little bite marks as they chomp them out. So take something at night like newspaper or an opened cardboard box or an umbrella or something like that. Put it under the bush and give it a good old shake, and that should dislodge the adults, which will fall into there, and you can then collect them up and relocate them. For the larvae, you've really got to take the plant out of the pot, if it's a potted plant, and remove the compost and search amongst the roots for the larvae and pick them out, and again collect them and relocate them. Of course, that's harder if it's in the ground itself, but it's really the only way to make sure you're removing them. As for nematodes, this is a really interesting one, because for quite a while now, adding nematodes as a biological control is the way that is often recommended to get rid of vine weevil larvae these days. The question is it vegan to deliberately add nematodes, which will then go on to kill the larvae? Of course, nematodes are microscopic worms, and they're everywhere in the soil and all over the vegetables. So actually, a lot of the time when we're eating vegetables, we're eating nematodes ourselves. But yes, I'd quite like to hear what the others think about whether deliberately adding nematodes to kill another animal is a veganic method.
Yeah, I will just, I know Than will join in as well, but I'm just going to tell you a very quick story about that. I was interviewed for a newspaper article about pests and diseases, and I was asked about vine weevil, and I'd said, you know, I've struggled with vine weevil, and it was all recorded on the telephone, so it wasn't typed. And I'd said, the girl who was interviewing said to me, "Do nematodes work?" And my answer was, yes, they work, but there are other ways of doing it. And then the headline was, Ellen Mary, expert gardener, nematodes do kill vine weevil. And I phoned her and I said, I never said that. And also I don't use them. I'm a veganic gardener. So in my mind, putting those into the soil is intentionally killing another creature. And they did actually change the headline for me as well. So that was quite good. But that's kind of my stance on it. I would do the shake the plant thing. But maybe Than has another kind of viewpoint of that, or some other ideas of how to get rid of vine weevils.
No, I agree. Ethically, I don't like biological controls, especially if those species aren't there. I mean, it's different when you're actually restoring the natural ecological balance of the soil, which we should be doing as a basis of organic management anyway. Healthy soil, provide lots of different habitats so the natural beneficial insects and predators are able to thrive. But introducing it in this sort of way, and then the breeding of it in factories, etc., yeah, like that doesn't sit with my ethics. Yeah, so I'd go for the manual intervention really. For this one, it's a tricky one, and I think everyone is there to draw their own line, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sort of a niche, ethical dilemma, but yeah, I'm gonna grab that.
Absolutely. I can always remember years and years ago going out to the garden and picking slugs and snails off plants. It's the same for vine weevils, just remove them and rehome them somewhere away from your plants, That's how I see it, but like you said, it depends on how you feel about it.
And I think they are very slow. They're slow moving, aren't they? They're quite an easy thing to remove relatively. They're not sort of, it's one that lends itself quite nicely to physical intervention. So
yeah. So there you go. It's a late night vine weevil collection job, that is. But thank you both very much. Okay, next question is, hi VGQT, are wormeries considered veganic or are they not, as they keep the worms captive and exploit them? Also, is it vegan to use carnivorous plants like sundews and pitcher plants to kill pests? Thank you. That's from Tawny in Pembrokeshire. So that's two questions in one. Are wormeries veganic and is using carnivorous plants veganic? Who'd like to take that one?
I can have a go. Yeah, again, a fantastic question. I love these sort of ethical dilemmas. Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, the vegan philosophy is, of course, the right for all beings, live and let live, right? For all beings to live on this planet, because all beings desire life. That's the first thing. But what we don't sort of realize is also the freedom of movement, which is a big issue for human beings now. But the freedom of a creature, however small, to move freely, and if a worm is in a wormery, and there's no direct contact with the ground, then that is I suppose it's a form of captivity, which I probably wouldn't do. But then, what do you do if you're growing on if you're really short I've never been in a situation where I'm sort of trying to compost in a balcony or a situation like that. So again, it's one for people to draw their line. And with the plants, again, I think the line is, if you're restoring the balance of an ecosystem by reintroducing species which would have been there in far vaster numbers, and agriculture in itself has significantly wiped out so many things, and organic growing, veganic growing is about sort of allowing those things to flourish, then maybe that's okay. And well, I suppose some of these plants are native, but again, they're not. So that's a tricky one. I don't really want to answer that one. That's probably very, very tricky, and I haven't used them myself, but I suppose you're allowing another being to also flourish. So it's a bit sort of in sort of overall biodiversity terms. And is more life flourishing, then possibly you can argue that you can use plants to as a form of predation.
Yeah, understood. That's it. That's the dilemma. Piers, anything to add to it?
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing about where people draw the line on how they behave and to what extent is it veganic or vegan way of doing things. And for example, here in my relatively new garden, I've built a pond because I wanted to attract wildlife, and ponds are beautiful things. But of course, I'll be attracting some predators. I'll be attracting things like frogs and toads and other creatures that will then go on and prey on slugs and things like that, which of course in lots of ways is what we want as a veganic gardener, because it's a natural way of controlling pests. So how is that different from for example having some carnivorous plants? I suppose the difference is, if I put a carnivorous plant in my greenhouse, then I am directly causing it to kill some creatures in the greenhouse, rather than just allowing carnivorous plants to naturally colonize my greenhouse, which of course is never going to happen. So I do actually have some sundew plants because they are very beautiful little plants. And of course, some sundews are native to the UK. So it's yes, it's a very tricky fine line, that. And I see actually we've got a comment that's come in while we've been talking, which is from somebody who says, it's Anne actually, who says if it's okay if predators turn up on their own, as that's natural. So that's exactly the point. In the same way that we'd like to encourage hedgehogs into our garden, partly because hedgehogs are wonderful, and we need to provide better homes for them because they're endangered, but also the slugs and the other pests. So encouraging them is fine. Buying hedgehogs to put in your garden is probably not fine in terms of being truly veganic. So yeah, some pretty fine lines here for people to judge.
It's a very difficult one. I know some who buy in ladybirds to put into the garden, for example. Is that acceptable? It depends on how you feel about it. I don't do that, but I know some people that do. So, it's a difficult one for sure. We'll leave that one with you all to ponder on this evening.
I just wanted to add, actually, it's a really good point. So someone growing on a balcony, I've seen where people brought in not bought, but actually relocated ladybird.
Right.
That I think, actually that insect can fly. So there's that, going back to that freedom of movement. So I suppose you've sort of nudged it, but there is still scope for, again, we're going into a very sort of continuum of ethical.
That's the theme of this evening, it seems. Let's take the next question. And this is from Barry. How can I protect sweet corn cobs from squirrels? I have a very time-consuming answer, which is on the brightongroveallotments.org website. Also, some squirrels have got through this defense, so I developed an even stronger but more time-consuming system. Would welcome any easier but still effective systems. Now, I can't click on the link from where I am right now, so I'm not entirely sure what that whole time-consuming system is. But if Piers or Tan does have any ideas for keeping squirrels off sweet corn cobs, then let us know.
Well, the method that Barry is talking about is using empty plastic bottles and having the cob inside the plastic bottle, and therefore protecting it. So he must have some pretty strong-minded squirrels to get through that. And I have no idea what the other method he's talking about that's even more stronger and time-consuming to do. But yeah, squirrels can be a problem with crops like that. They can be very determined. Obviously, one answer is to grow the sweet corn within a cage. But again, it would have to be a pretty strong cage using something like chicken wire so that the squirrels can't get through to it. Other methods which could be worth a try are spraying the plants or around the plants with something that will deter the squirrels. For example, I know that some people have used peppermint oil spray, and some others have used red pepper sauce as a sort of a spray. You could even do some experiments where one year you spray around the plants with something like that, or even spray over the cobs themselves, which of course will be protected with the sheath of leaves that grow around it. But yeah, squirrels can be pretty determined.
Yeah. Dan, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, not much, but yeah, polyculture really. So growing lots of these aromatics around. Certainly the Lamiaceae mint family tends to have these sort of strong compounds, which certainly for rabbits and things, they certainly don't like. And I think squirrels also may have a not really keen on that sort of smell. I've also heard, this is pure, I haven't tried this, and it maybe not in a communal space, but apparently human urine diluted, which also brings back to the closing the loop thing. Actually, I know it has an effect and good in deterring foxes, but possibly squirrels, I've read. So if you're open to that, there we are.
That's definitely closing the loop. That's helping with that for sure. I can remember visiting a kind of like a winter garden in North Carolina, and the gardener there was spraying all around the shrubs. And my assumption, which we know we should never do, as I walked closer, was to assume that he was spraying with something not very nice. And I thought, oh gosh, I'm going to have to ask him what he's spraying. And I got closer, and then I could smell mint. And I said, what are you spraying all the shrubs with? And he said, well, we have so many deer here that I spray peppermint mix all around the shrubs, and it really helps to deter them. But I have to do it a lot. He said, so most days I kind of alternate different areas of the garden, and every day somewhere gets this peppermint spray. So it must work. He definitely said that it kept them off the shrubs. So there you go, peppermint or urine. There's your answer.
Yeah, I've heard that actually human urine is also good at deterring badgers as well as foxes and squirrels. And of course, it's good for the compost heap. So basically, just wee everywhere, and you'll be fine.
Isn't there a song, pull down your pants and fertilize the ants or something? Isn't that an old song from a long time ago?
Well, it is now, yeah.
Let's move on to the next question very quickly. Okay, so the next question, this is the big one. How does animal agriculture impact the planet? Who would like to take this one first?
Yeah, I can go. God, we can talk about this all day, really, isn't it? And at the start of the show very aptly highlights it. Well, ecology functions on the food, well, a pyramid, though. So on the foundation, the basis of all life, the foundation of the food chain are plants, which are primary producers, which take sunlight and convert. They make their own food, and the rest of us are sort of free riding on the back of that. And above that, you've got the herbivores, the huge hordes of herbivores and plant eaters who feed on the grasslands and the forests and the foliage. And above that, you've got your carnivores, your smaller carnivores and your apex predators at the top. But crucial to this is that the food chain can't, every layer that you go up, you can support fewer and fewer numbers of creatures because energy is lost. So we can't have that many predators. They can only, if anyone has watched a nature documentary, there aren't as many lions as there are gazelles. Sadly, we are in a situation where human beings we are of the numbers of herbivores, even more so, but we are behaving like apex predators, and there's simply not enough carrying capacity on this planet to support that kind of a diet. In this country, 60% of the land is used for animal farming, either directly or to grow feed for those animals. And if it's not grown here to fatten them, it's coming from the Amazon and rainforest, causing huge amounts of destruction for what is very, very small amount of our dietary needs, around about 18% of our calories. I think globally, 18% globally, maybe a bit more here. But yeah, in terms of water use, potatoes or vegetables, potatoes slightly even more hungry of the vegetables per kilo, maybe something like 250, 300 liters average. A kilo of beef, 10,000 liters of water. It simply cannot be sustained. And all of our, I've actually, very recently, we were very lucky enough to go to Romania, to the Carpathian Mountains, to see bears, which has been a lifelong ambition of mine. And it was amazing, but it was also very sad that we wiped out pretty much every single predator and creature that would have lived in this country. We could have had all of these forests. And the primary reason is that we have persecuted them because they were a threat to our domesticated animals, or the animals that we have farmed were encroaching. They were destroying the habitats of all these other creatures. So it is the single most destructive force on this planet, the consumption and subjugation of animals. This is ethics aside about the morality of taking life when we absolutely don't need to. So, yeah.
Thank you, Dan. Piers, would you like to add anything?
Well, as has just been said, of course, land use, water use, things like that. These are the really major things, especially the amount of land used for livestock. But of course, there's pollution is a big thing as well. Pollution of our rivers and our oceans and of the land itself, and it's such a big subject. So I'll just finish by saying, if you want to go into this into more depth, then there's no book that I can recommend more thoroughly than Regenesis by George Monbiot, which goes into this in extreme detail. And in order to write the book, George himself read 5,000 scientific research papers on all of these subjects around the livestock industry and how it's affecting the planet. So really recommend that book.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Such a big question. It's at the heart of everything, that we do here with the Veganic Organic Network and here on the Gardener's Question Time. And again, if you head over to the website, there's some information and advice on there as well. And there's a lot of research out there that you can find online. Just know where it's come from, because obviously there's a lot that's, statistics are, it depends on who's basically paid for the research to be done. But if you are, careful and you look closely at what the research is, it's all out there. The stats are there. It shows you that we can't carry on as we are. So that's a big one. Thank you for whoever sent that question in, because your name wasn't there, but it's really, really important. I think that we're going to end soon, but let's just go with one last question. I think this is a really good question that we can finish up the show with. What is the best way to keep fresh picked vegetables fresh? I'm fairly new to this and have been disappointed at how quickly my ripe veggies go soft or turn colors after I've harvested them. How do those store-bought ones hold their freshness for so long? Thanks for the show, Rob. Piers, do you want to take this one up first about storing veggies?
Sure. Well, of course, the fruit and veg that you've bought in the shop are quite often harvested before they're ripe. So by the time you get them home, they will only just be starting to ripen. So they will have a longer shelf life, and they will have been stored in optimal conditions for that. For example, if you buy a bag of salad leaves, often they will be in a gas, not just air, but a gas that's been especially formulated to keep it fresh for the longest. So at home, some of the key things to think about are temperature and humidity. So for example, if you've picked a lettuce from the garden and you want to eat that over the next 2-3 days, then it needs to be in quite a humid environment, so that it doesn't wilt. So the best thing to do is to wash the lettuce, shake it off, put it in a plastic bag or a container, and then put that in the bottom of your fridge, which should be around about 5 degrees. If you're storing carrots, though, you don't want them to get too humid because then they start to rot. So if you, for example, if you've bought carrots from a shop and they come in a plastic bag, then I would immediately take them out of that plastic bag and put them loose in the bottom of your fridge. Otherwise, they will rot fairly quickly because of the higher humidity. Same goes with other things like potatoes, for example. When you harvest them, you want to keep them cool and dry. So something like a very dry garage or a shed or something like that, but cool. Whereas apples, on the other hand, of course, we'll pick these usually around October time, and they prefer a slightly moister environment to last longer. So in that situation, something like an old brick outhouse, which is not entirely dry, just slightly damp, would be a better environment for the apple. But I am talking about long-term storage here. So for example, if you want an apple to last for months, that would be the ideal. Whereas when you buy apples from a shop, which of course you can do all year round, regardless of where they're grown, they can be stored for much longer periods. But again, that's because it's very highly controlled, not just in temperature and humidity, but also in terms of the gases that they're kept in, which is something that's, we can't really do on the home scale, of course.
Are we all there? I'm not sure.
Yeah, we couldn't hear you for a while.
Oh, I'm really sorry. Sorry about that. Dan, is there anything you'd like to add to that before we finish up?
Not much, but yeah, I mean, it's a big issue with even how this sort of miraculous phenomenon where vegetables last forever comes from, when you buy it from the supermarket. A lot of them have also been bred for transportation and storage, not for nutrition, which is a tragedy, really. And that's partly because of this huge globalized food system, which I'm sure we're all trying to change. And of course, post-harvest chemicals as well are a big part of that. We think of pesticides and chemicals as something that's used during production, but also there's a huge array of chemicals after use. But yeah, varying storage strategies for different vegetables. Yeah. So yeah, not much to add.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Well, it's been a pleasure chatting with both of you this evening. There's been some really good topics. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. And I'm sorry we didn't get around to all of them. Hopefully, the others will be picked up on another Gardeners Question Time on another date. These are really frequent. So keep an eye out on the website and the social media and YouTube. You can look back through all the other videos as well. There's loads of really good questions and answers there too. So there's a huge resource for veganic growing out there through the Vegan Organic Network. So don't forget to have a look at joining the garden map as well, because that's absolutely excellent. And thank you so much, Dan and Piers. It's been a pleasure chatting with you this evening. And thank you, everyone at home, for being veganic gardeners. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.